Welcome to the show. I am your host, Eric Donnelly Small. If you are tuning in from YouTube, thank you very much for joining me. Sorry for that glitch early on there. This stream streams live on Stream Me. That's stream.vtip.me. And this stream began at around 10 a.m. this morning, Eastern Standard Time. And on it, I already went through the manhunt, which I will go over briefly again right now for this audience. But you can always catch this stream. It's streaming simultaneously at stream.vtip.me. And I will, on that stream, play additional content that will go longer than this YouTube video stream. But I do want to get to here some of the news of the day so that we can be caught up on what's going on. And the manhunt continues. People may not realize this if you do or don't, but the manhunt continues, and the gentleman. I don't know if I like calling him a gentleman, but Richard Card is still on the loose. There is a shelter in place order that is in effect right now. And one of the most surprising things that came up out of the story today, there was a press conference earlier, is that there is almost a disconnect as to, basically the view that the public seems to have to some extent, because one of the most interesting questions that came out of that press conference was a question from a reporter about whether people can go hunting tomorrow over the weekend. And it appears as if there is a tradition where the folks in Maine go out hunting. We know that that is a state that believes strongly in gun rights and whatnot. But here you had this mass murder, and people are concerned about being able to go hunting over the weekend, and it's a striking disconnect that I don't know if we can say that's only happens in America, but it is really quite shocking. Anyway, I want to get to this some of this information that we've got today about what we know about this guy. Robert Card is his name. I think I may have mentioned it when I was reporting on this yesterday, but this is from Newsweek, and this is a little bit earlier today. Part of what we know, what happened over the weekend, this guy shot at two locations, one being a bowling alley where there were children around, 18 dead, more probably dead or close to death because of the bullet wounds and the type of weapon he was using. And one of the things that we discovered is that the as soon as he fled, the search continued, and they were able to go to his a residence owned maybe by his father. It's apparently on a lot of land, acreages of land, and what it appears is that they may have found some interesting information there. I'm just going to read this. Again, this is from Newsweek, and it says Robert Card, the suspect in the deadly mass shooting at a bowling alley and restaurant in Lewiston, Maine on Wednesday night, reportedly left a suicide note to his son. Card is an Army reservist assigned to training facility in Maine. Killed at least 18 people and wounded 13 others after opening fire with an assault weapon at the just-in-time recreation bowling alley and Schmigan's Bar and Grill restaurant. He fled after the shooting, sparking a massive police search. He's still considered at large and is armed and dangerous, as hundreds of Maine state police officers, with the help of FBI, U.S. Marshals, and BATF, are currently looking to locate him as of Friday. Currently, not much is known about the content of the note, which law enforcement sources told ABC News that it does not provide any information that indicates a motive for the mass shooting. Police search for Card is now on the second day, with Lewiston residents still asked to stay at home to avoid any possible dangerous contact with the suspect. Card's family is cooperating with law enforcement in the search, according to reports. His sister told investigators that Card might have been looking for an ex girlfriend in the two shooting locations. Sources told ABC News Card was previously married, but his second wife filed for divorce in 2007. He had shared custody of their child, who was then a minor, according to court documents cited by the news agency. Um, so, right now, we've got just speculation on what is going on with this guy, where he might be. I am going to see if we have any more details. I'm using the News Center Maine. They have a YouTube channel where they are showing, the press conferences and reporting on this. So I'm going to use that as my source to see if they have any new information. I am looking right now, and it does not appear. It appears to just be maybe a review. I think I've seen that guy on other programs about what he saw. He's just a witness of the shooting the day of. So I'm actually going to keep an eye on that, and if any new news comes across on that site, I will take a look at it and click over to it. Meanwhile, I want to continue with the news. We've got our first in-depth interview with this guy, Mike Johnson, who is the new second in line to the president, the Speaker of the House. And he is about as bad as they could get. I mean, MAGA may have actually won the day on this one. But it goes, this is from Politico, and apparently he appeared on the Hannity show yesterday. And it says, House Speaker Mike Johnson, the previously little known Louisiana Republican who claimed the chamber's gavel this week after 22 days of chaos, gave a wide ranging interview to Fox News' Sean Hannity regarding President Biden. If you look at a tape of Joe Biden making an argument in the Senate Judiciary Committee a few years ago and you see the speech he delivers now, there's a difference. Again, it's not personal insult to him, it's just reality. The Biden administration, I think it's been a failed presidency. Foreign aid to Ukraine and Israel. I told staff at the White House today that our consensus among House Republicans is that we need to bifurcate those issues. Foreign policy, bifurcate meaning split them out. Foreign policy, we can't allow Vladimir Putin to prevail in Ukraine because I don't believe it would stop there. I would probably encourage and empower China to perhaps make a move on Taiwan. We have these concerns. To perhaps make a move on Taiwan, that seems odd. U.S. boots on the ground in Israel. It's a very delicate situation. It changes by the hour. We're watching it very closely. We certainly hope that it doesn't come to boots on the ground. Palestinian aid. They use the Palestinians as shields. They don't even provide the people with clean drinking water. We're supposed to believe they're going to use U.S. aid for humanitarian purposes. Count me as a skeptic. Biden impeachment. If in fact all the evidence leads to where we believe it will, there's very likely impeachable offenses. China. China is a near peer-to-peer adversary to us right now, and their goal is to rebuild the empire. So we're doing everything we can to ensure we maintain our military superiority. Motion to vacate. I think we're going to change it. Stopgap budget measure. We're working through this with the ideas and trying to ensure that if another stopgap measure is required, that we do it with certain conditions. Gay marriage. This has been settled by the Supreme Court in Obergefell opinion in 2015. So that decision, I'm a constitutional law attorney. I respect that, and we move forward. I doubt that. Abortion. There's no national consensus for the people on what to do with that issue on a federal issue for certain. This guy's a right-wing hawk. I don't know why he's going on Hannity to pretend he's anything other, but I thought that was an interesting set of answers that he gave when particularly with regard to gay marriage. Interesting. I wonder if someone's talking to him in his ear. Moving on. As people know, I like to go to CNBC just to see what's going on with respect to both the market, and they also have a great deal of breaking news on this channel, on this website, and on the channel. NASDAQ rebounds Friday, helped by Amazon. Apparently, Amazon reported good numbers, which is good for the economy. Ford shares fall 9% after earnings underlines worries about the cost of EV plans. Now, mind you, Ford just got into a deal with the unions, and I'm sure that's part of it. Ford stock is trading sharply down after the automaker reported earnings that fell short of estimates. While Ford was the first of the Detroit makers to reach a tentative deal with the UAW, the new contract will raise Ford's already high costs even higher if ratified. Ford is also delaying the $12 billion in investment in EV production as demand is not what is expected. Interesting. I'm actually a big fan of Ford in terms of their stock. Not giving stock advice. I'm not giving stock advice, but I'm a big fan. If you have money, don't put it in Bitcoin, put it in Ford stock, in my view. I'm going to mute for a minute. I got okay, that went away. Let me see what CNBC is reporting on the main shooter, just out of curiosities. If there's any additional information that would be helpful to us. Authorities were still searching Friday for the suspect. A warrant has been issued for the arrest of Robert Card. We know everyone is still in shelter in place. He's a trained firearms instructor. As recently as the summer, he suffered a mental health issue. I think we all know this information already. The rifle used by the gunman was purchased legally, law enforcement told NBC News. Police said the shooter opened fire. Three people were later pronounced dead at the hospital. Two businesses are about 12 minutes apart. The two businesses. 8 victims remain hospitalized on Thursday evening, 5 of whom were in stable condition. 3 were in critical. The mass shooting has reignited America's long running but politically stalled debate over gun control. One of the things that I find interesting that Hannity didn't mention is, and I could bring that up again, but I don't think he mentioned anything about guns with respect to that interview with Hannity. This guy, Mike Johnson. We already know from reporting that he is a big time NRA supporter and a big Second Amendment gun guy. So already some of his statements, I think, in the past have been troubling with respect to doing anything really that would be helpful regarding guns, some kind of a assault weapons ban. Moving on, um, this is an interesting news story that follows up on a conversation that we had that was big during the summer, and this is from CNN, and particularly I guess in black media, this was a big story. But um, a riverboat was trying to get docked. It was full of people. It was returning from being at sea, and it was trying to get docked, and another boat was parked in its docking location. So the second in command went to shore and asked the guy to move, and a fight broke out, and because they refused to move, and that became a brawl, and it was caught on video. It became huge on social media, and it appears as if there is more information. There's new information with regard, because these guys were arrested. Apparently, all the figures involved were arrested, but it looks like there's some new news here. 5 people charged in connection with a melee at an Alabama riverboat dock are expected to stand trial and could learn their fates on Friday. Alan Todd, Mary Todd, Reggie Ray, Richard Roberts, and Zachary Shipman have been charged in connection with the August 5th brawl in Montgomery. The Todds and Shipman are each charged with 1 count of third-degree assault. Roberts is charged with 2 counts of third-degree assault, and Ray is charged with disorderly conduct. All 5 defendants have pleaded not guilty, and each will be tried separately Friday. The judge could rule on each case and issue any possible sentence by the end of the day. The fracas, which some believe may have been racially motivated, erupted after a dispute over a dockside parking spot. It started when the co-captain of the Harriet II cruise ship carrying 227 passengers tried to dock in its reserved spot but found a private boat docked in its space, Montgomery Police Chief Darrell Albert said in August. The Harriet II and its passengers waited for 45 minutes as the co-captain Damian Pinkett tried to reach the occupants of the docked boat using a PA system, but they were only responded with obscene gestures, curse words, and taunting. Albert said. Pickett was then picked up by a young dock worker in another vessel and taken to the dock so that he could try to speak with the boat occupants and get them to move, Albert said. There, the boat occupants confronted the captain in a very hostile manner, the chief said. Pickett was attacked by several members of the private boat and was treated at a hospital that night, the chief said. Several Harriet II crewmen came to Pickett's defense, according to the chief. The incident, which was caught on video, largely broke down along racial lines. Police said Pickett, the black co-captain of the Harriet II, and the 16-year-old white boy who helped take Pickett to the dock to try to speak to the owner of the private boat were both assaulted. The mother of the white teen said she heard racist comments directed at Pickett. You could hear the men yelling F that enter as the black co-captain tried to move a pontoon boat occupying the riverboat's docking station, the teen's mother said in a sworn statement to police. But the black co-captain told police he didn't think the attack was racially motivated. CNN has reached out to Montgomery Police for an update on the investigation. Um, so it looks like this investigation looked into hate crime charges. Police said that the local investigators work with FBI to determine whether to file hate crime charges in the case. Um, Again, this is in Montgomery, Alabama. So Montgomery played a central role in transatlantic slave trade, etc., etc. So um, that case is still ongoing, and the five people charged looks like they are going to have their day in court. Let me just show a picture of that. These are the folks that are involved. From the left, this is Alan Todd. Let me see if I can bring out my thing. This is where my mouse is. This is Todd. This is Mary Todd. I don't know if they're brother and sister, or I think they're probably brother and sister. Reggie Ray is right here. Richard Roberts is right here. And Zachary Shipman is right here. So, there you go. Um, that case is not resolved and is starting to just wind up. I'm very interested to see. These are charges. I'm sure that there's going to be a plea deal. I cannot imagine that they're going to actually go to trial. Um, Moving on. Interesting story. I mean, I think that, and this is from the Atlanta Black Star, which I tend to read that in the Root and a couple of others just to get sort of the pulse of what's going on in Black America regarding a lot of issues. You don't get that perspective from a lot of places. But this is an Atlanta Black Star, and it looks like there is um, a schism or breakdown or some kind of a dividing line between, I think particularly, well, between black organizations and Israelis slash Jews in America. There has always been a dividing line between the two. But what's going on in Israel has sort of exacerbated that problem. Mind you, among young whites, there is a dividing line there as well. We know that much younger people are more to be on the side of Palestinians, particularly in the Democratic Party, particularly liberals, whereas more of the older white folks, and maybe black as well, are much more on the Israeli side and don't understand why America, or don't understand why young people would side with Hamas and with the Arab folks, and the young people don't understand why we side with Israel all the time. So uh, one of the ways this really came out recently is Mark Lamont Hill, on his show, sort of really and let me see if there is actually a video here of the. He had apparently someone on his show, which was representing the not just the ADL, but Israeli Defensive IDF, I think, on his show, interviewing him, and he was asking some pretty tough questions. I don't have the video for that. I've only saw a clip of it, but it looks like those questions did not go over well with the ADL. So they are trying to get the ADL is trying to put popular big name African American black artists on blast to get them to respond to what is going on and get them on the record what's going on in Israel and in the Palestinian territories. And I'm just going to read this. See if I can. I'm just going to read this because I'm very curious myself as to what this article says and the opinion that is saying. So, journalist Mark Lamont Hill reacted to a social media post by Black Lives Matter chapter in Chicago earlier this month that received significant backlash online. The now deleted post on X, the website previously known as Twitter, showed the figure of a person with a parachute with a Palestinian flag attached to it over a legend that read, "I stand with Palestine," according to a screenshot from the New York Post. That is all that is it. That is all that is it. The caption said, I don't know what that means. BLM Chicago, one of the many organizations using Black Lives Matter slogan, was criticized for the post, which came after Hamas, a militant group, used paragliders during their surprise deadly attack on an Israeli music festival in early October that left hundreds dead. BLM group appeared to apologize for the graphic that the next day. However, the Anti-Defamation League made a public statement about the organization and other independent groups for their support for the Hamas invasion. ADL CEO Jonathan Greenblatt took to Twitter to address his concerns. Quote, "The post shared in recent days by BLM chapters in Chicago and LA and other fringe groups glorifying the Hamas terrorists who used hang gliders to infiltrate Israel, slaughtering over 1,000 innocents, is beyond sick and twisted. It's anti-Semitic, dehumanizing, and could prompt violence," Greenblatt wrote in a lengthy thread on October 11th. During a sit-down with the Breakfast Club, personality DJ Envy asked Hill about his opinion of the Black Lives Matter organization's post. "I thought that it was in poor taste. I don't want to celebrate or romanticize the killing of civilians, so I didn't like that," Hill said. Hill, host of Al Jazeera's Up Front, said in an interview released on October 17th, "Standing in solidarity with the Palestinian people as they resist, there's nothing wrong with that." The author and academic later added, "When I see somebody, whether it's BLM or anyone else, romanticizing the killings of civilians, I say no, I say that's wrong. I say that doesn't help our cause, but I don't want to pretend that the only strategy that black folks have, or the only strategy Palestinians have, or the only strategy that any people have is nonviolence. This idea that Palestinians are supposed to just sit there as they're being beaten and shot and killed is ridiculous." On the program, he chimed in on DJ Vlad's comments, calling out DJ Khaled, who is Palestinian American, and rapper Drake, who is Jewish, for not speaking up on these issues. Vlad also doubled down on his stance a few days before his appearance on the Breakfast Club, citing their influence. DJ Vlad's post says, "Has anyone noticed that the most famous Jewish person on earth, Drake, and the most famous Palestinian person on earth, DJ Khaled, haven't said a single thing about the Gaza-Israeli conflict? It's not like Drake is too busy. He's been writing paragraphs about Joe Bunning hurting." Okay, I'm not going to be able to go to that Twitter. Hell yeah, they should say something, Hill said. "Yes, more Khaled than Drake. They never talk about social issues, ever," Charlemagne the God said. "I know, and I have an issue with that. I don't think every famous person has to say something about everything. But if your people are being exterminated, if your people are being executed, if your people are being killed, whatever the circumstances, I think you've got to say something. Interesting take by Mark Lamont Hill. He was, I think, and I don't know all the details on it, but I know he was used to be a correspondent over there at CNN, and I think because of his comments or some comments that he had made, he was removed, or they didn't renew his contract. I don't know when that happened, but um, Mark Lamont Hill there talking about his opinion on what should be going on, and what celebrities should say. I didn't realize DJ Khaled was Palestinian American. Moving on, so I want to talk a little bit about the 2024 election that is fast approaching. It will be here before you know it. And we're beginning to see some very interesting things happening statewide. We're beginning to see some interesting things happening with regard to redistricting, with regard to what is happening, what is going on. And I don't want people to miss out on this. This is really significant, both the president's side, the House and Senate, all of it. So, I want to begin with this story. Now, I read a story yesterday about how North Carolina has gerrymandered their maps so that it will be all but impossible for Democrats to hold on to 3 seats in Congress. That might be enough to keep it in the hands of Mike Johnson, who we just heard from earlier. But here is some reporting out of the New York Times, which may give some encouragement to Democrats going forward. And that is that Republicans in Georgia violated the landmark civil rights law in drawing voting maps that diluted the power of black voters. A federal judge in Atlanta ruled on Thursday, ordering that new maps must be drawn in time for the 2024 elections. Steve Jones of the Northern District of Georgia demanded that the state's legislature move swiftly to sketch out congressional and General Assembly districts that provide an equitable level of representation for black residents who make up more than a third of the state's population. In the ruling, Judge Jones wrote that the court will not allow another election cycle on redistricting plans that had been found to be unlawful. Brian Kemp, a Republican, responded on Thursday by calling a special session of the Georgia General Assembly that will begin on November 29th, giving lawmakers 10 days to meet December 8th deadline set by by Judge Jones. The timeline, Judge Jones wrote, ensures that if an acceptable remedy is not produced, there will be time for the court to fashion one. Just a little context, and actually it may go into a little bit of context, but part of what's going on here and why there may be hope here is that Alabama tried to do the same thing. The Supreme Court, the very conservative Supreme Court, voted that it was a racial gerrymander, what they tried to do in Alabama, and told them to rewrite their maps. They were unable to do that, and a judge went ahead and rewrote their maps. But continuing on, Georgia is one of several southern states where Republicans are defending congressional maps that federal judges have said appear to discriminate against black voters. Republican officials assailed the ruling. Josh McCoon, good Lord, the state party chairman, described it in a statement as a naked power grab. It is simply outrageous that one far left federal judge is invalidating the will of the elected representatives of the people of Georgia, who drew fair maps in conformity with longstanding legal practices. Now, let's just, go over this a little bit briefly. The Voting Rights Act, which was passed because the South was doing this all the time. The South traditionally for decades, prior to 1965 and the Voting Rights Act, I think it's in 65, 60, 64, 65, I cannot remember which, but the had multiple sections, and it was because we knew that we couldn't trust, the country knew that it could not trust the South to draw fair maps and to give power to African Americans, to blacks. So what it demanded in multiple sections, one of the sections it demanded is a prevention of racial gerrymanders. I think that conservatives, particularly those in these southern states, had hoped that you have now a 6-3 conservative, and I would argue pro-racism or pro-racist judges on the Supreme Court, that they would agree with southern states that try to create gerrymandered maps that dilutes the power of black residents and say it's not racial. Oh yeah, we are diluting the voting power of blacks, but it's not because we're racist. It's because they're not. It's a political gerrymander. Apparently, surprise, surprise to everyone, the conservative court voted 6-3 that yeah, there is a such thing as a racial gerrymander, and it's pretty damn obvious. And we saw it in Alabama, and now it appears Georgia's doing this, and we know that North Carolina, as I read yesterday, is doing the same thing. But these judges that are further down, that are not on the Supreme Court, but are further down the line, are now emboldened now that they've got guidance to some extent from the Supreme Court that there is still Section 2 is still alive in the it is still constitutional and seen constitutional by the Supreme Court, even though they have gutted other sections. I believe it's Section 2. I'm going to continue reading, and it will correct me if I'm wrong, I'm certain. But this is what the South has already done. And there was a belief, according to the court over the years, that we've had a black president. Racism can't be around anymore. We've got black presidents, so we must have done away with racism. But nope, in true fashion, Georgia, Alabama, North Carolina, and other states are proving that no, we still got racism. So, moving on, continuing on with this reporting. This is again the New York Times from yesterday, or yeah, yesterday, late last night. The challenges to these maps were invigorated by a Supreme Court ruling in June that found that race could play a role in redistricting, a surprise decision that upheld the key remaining tenet of the Voting Rights Act of 65, a central legislative achievement of the civil rights movement that has otherwise been largely gutted by the court's conservative majority in recent years. As part of regular redistricting process that happens each decade after the census, Georgia Republicans had sought to water down Democratic influences by separating key blocks of voters into different districts. Two predominantly black suburbs, for example, were moved out of a district represented by Representative David Scott, a black Democrat, and moved into hardline Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene. But in doing so, Judge Jones found that Georgia had violated the Voting Rights Act by undercutting the power of black voters in the state's congressional map and its division of state house districts. Georgia has made great strides since 65 towards equality voting. However, the evidence before this court shows that Georgia has not reached the point where the political process, has equal openness and equal opportunity for everyone. The redistricting plans came as Democrats had gained new ground in Georgia, which had once been reliably Republican. Black voters were a driving force in the transformation, making up the highest share of growth in the Georgia electorate, which increased by 1.9 million voters between 2000 and 2019, according to a Pew Research Center analysis. In the legal challenge to the maps, critics argued that the size of the black electorate in the state warranted at least one additional majority black district in Congress, as well as additional majority black districts in the state House of Representatives. Plaintiffs in the challenge include Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, the nation's oldest black fraternity, which has thousands of members in Georgia, and the African Methodist Episcopal Church, one of the oldest Protestant denominations founded by black people with hundreds of congregations in Georgia. Judge Jones, who was appointed by the federal to the federal bench in 2011 by President Barack Obama, had allowed the challenged map to go into effect in 2022, calling it a difficult decision that the court did not make lightly. That decision was one of several that found it was too close to that year's election to implement new maps. Republicans had argued that there was ample evidence to show that black voters retained an equal influence in the state, pointing to the success of Raphael Warnock and Representative Lucy McBath, a Democrat who flipped a Republican held seat, among others. When Miss McBath saw her district redrawn to overwhelmingly favor Republicans, she successfully challenged another Democratic representative, Carolyn Boudreaux, in a different suburban Atlanta seat. But the Supreme Court's unexpected decision to uphold Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, when it agreed that Alabama had illegally diluted the power of black voters, has also had implications for Georgia. With control of the House hinging on a narrow Republican majority, it is possible that redrawing just a few districts in the South could flip control of the chamber. The court also said that the legislature needed to redraw its state map. The decision in Georgia could be appealed. Republicans in other states have sought to draw out litigation to avoid new maps that are less politically favorable to their incumbents. So here we see the tried and true, the reason for the Voting Rights Act is that we know that this is what they do. This is what conservatives do. And this is how they have retained and grown power, is by these redrawing of maps that heavily favor or dilute the power of African Americans. This is a tried and true, this is what's been around for a long time, and it is authoritarianism. Let us be clear. When you begin to believe that democracy no longer works, and that the only way that this country can be quote unquote saved is by not allowing the people that you don't like or don't agree with to be able to vote and have power, because you need to retain power to quote unquote save this country, you're running an autocratic business. And conservatism has always had in its white supremacy, I should say, has always had at its core authoritarianism. That's why Donald Trump, that's why, MAGA, that's why all of this stuff that we are now talking about and claiming, like, surprise, surprise, we can't believe that this is what's going on in this country, exists. It is an authoritarian movement. It is hitting on African Americans. It is hitting on women. It is hitting on foreigners. It is hitting across the board. And they need to retain power so that they can control the masses, so that they can control the American people, to prevent them from being able to have the power to determine their own lives. This is anti-freedom. It is anti-democracy. It is authoritarianism. And I said this before earlier this week. I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before. People trying to blame Donald Trump like this didn't exist. Mitt Romney is, all of a sudden it's like he's Rip Van Winkle. He just woke up to the fact that the Republican Party doesn't believe in democracy anymore. I mean, give me a break. On the state level, this has been going on for decades. But this is what's happening in the lead up to 2024. They're still at. I mean, when was the census? The census was during Trump's administration. They're still redoing, drawing lines. It's stunning. Continuing on, this is a quick story. This is the Daily Beast. Two Democratic congressmen announced on Thursday they would not seek another congressional term in 2024. Opening seats in Maryland and North Carolina, Rep. John Sarbanes, who served 18 years in the chamber over the course of 9 terms, said he plans to return to nonprofit work. For some time now, I have found myself drawn back to that kind of work, wanting to explore the many opportunities to serve that exist outside of elected office. He said in a statement. Rep. Jeff Jackson of North Carolina announced that he would instead run for state attorney general, a decision that comes in the wake of a gerrymandering by North Carolina Republicans that all but guarantee he would not have won re-election in his district. I'm running for attorney general, and I'm going to use that job to go after political corruption, he said in a video on Thursday. So we know that there are Republicans who have made announcements already that they're not going to run again, or have threatened to not run again because of the dysfunction. So I would like to say that this is something that maybe the Republicans have cooked up to make life so miserable that Democrats don't want to run. But I tend to believe that this may be something that is happening across the board, not just with Democrats, but with all groups. So not just with Republicans, but all groups. Excuse me. I'm just trying to shut this off. Okay. Um, Moving on. A new challenger to Joe Biden apparently has surfaced. Little known Democratic Congressman Dean Phillips has launched a campaign to challenge Joe Biden, leaving many of his supporters and colleagues confused, if not downright upset. After weeks of speculation and behind the scenes maneuvering, Phillips finally publicly announced that he's running in an interview on CBS. The campaign website went live Thursday night, but simply solicits donations. The centrist midterm Minnesota congressman is expected to file paperwork to run in the primary contest in New Hampshire on Friday morning, the Secretary of State's office confirmed. Running on the slogan of Make America Affordable Again, a nod to former President Trump's Make America Great Again, Phillips brought a campaign bus and a government repair van to New Hampshire to make his case to voters. Mind you, there is some reporting, and I don't want to get into it, that Joe Biden is not going to be on the ballot in New Hampshire. I don't know why. I didn't read into it, but you can look into that on your own, I think. But that might be what he's trying to do here. In his interview on CBS, Phillips said that Biden had done a spectacular job for the country, but it's not about the past. This is an election about the future. I will not sit still. I will not be quiet when we're facing a numbers that are so clearly saying that we'll be facing an emergency next November. Phillips so far has not articulated policy differences between himself and Biden. Instead, he's pointing to Biden's age, saying that the younger generation should be given the opportunity to lead. It's not clear how Phillips' entry into the Democratic primary would achieve the goal of passing the torch to younger politicians. He is near certain to lose the Democratic nomination contest, and his pressure on the president's campaign cannot solve the issue of Biden's age. So I think some people are looking at this as possibly a no labels action here, that might be what's going on, that no labels is getting involved here somehow. I don't know. It sounds like it would be something that if I were no labels, or if I were somebody that was a part of that, that was that believed in muddying the waters for Democrats, it's definitely something that I would do, is try to recruit a useful idiot to run against Joe Biden, just for no other reason than to pull away, because you're not going to need to um, lose too many votes. I mean, this is going to be a very narrow election, as was before. And I think that part of what, like, no labels and these other groups are hoping for, particularly the Trump campaign, is to soften up Biden's numbers to the point where he is basically hurting and bleeding just enough numbers to bring in to allow somebody else to run instead. So that is what's going on there. Let me go into this one story, and I wanted to bring this story up because if anyone thinks that, you know, the Trump campaign, I mean, Donald Trump running for president, right? We know that he's in right now. He's in a courtroom in New York, fighting for his financial life in New York. But it's important to remember that a campaign is not just an individual, and that part of what makes Donald Trump so successful, or allowed him to become president, is that you have these, I would call them colluders, but I guess you could say staff, and you have a campaign, and these are experts, these are people who know what they're doing. And while people are sitting back and saying, "Oh my God, Donald Trump, he's in trial, he's this, he's that, he could go to jail, da 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 da," his campaign is still working, and they're working on the state level to ensure his winning. You know, they're not allowing these polling numbers and the polls that appear to show him beating his nearest competitor by 20, 30 points. They're not allowing that to convince them that they're safe. They are still working, and working hard to make sure that that he has a good shot of actually outright winning. This one story is out of Iowa, which I found very interesting. Um, At first glance, the series of Donald Trump rallies in Iowa this month look a lot like the events he held during his 2016 campaign, where he narrowly lost the state. Hundreds of fervent supporters cheering on a combative and grievance filled stump speech. But that's where the similarities end. In contrast, in 2016, when Trump was outorganized by rival Senator Ted Cruz and lost the first Republican presidential nominating contest in Iowa, he has established a much more sophisticated ground game, aiming at uh, hovering up and analyzing voter data to turn it into votes. The stakes are high. If Trump takes the state in January 15th contest in convincing fashion, it would fuel the narrative that he is all but assured the 2024 Republican presidential nomination. Reuters interviews with nearly 40 party leaders, Trump staff, and campaign volunteers in Iowa show how the former president has learned from his past mistakes. I don't think people realized in 2016 how shoestring it was, said Jeff Kaufman, chairman of the Iowa Republican Party, referring to the Trump campaign. If you compare 2016 to currently, it has at least 5 or 6 times the ground game. On Sunday, Trump will hold a rally in Sioux City, his eighth Iowa event in a little over a month. More than simply building enthusiasm for the candidate, the well attended rallies are used to identify voters and volunteers and start communicating with them. As supporters enter Trump rallies, they are met with giant screens messaging the time and date of the caucuses and how to find their precinct, while warm up speakers address the need to vote. Trump's nearest rival in the nomination, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, has built a much larger operation reinforced by out of state volunteers who flooded in over the summer to knock on doors. Similar to Cruz's 2016, DeSantis is crisscrossing Iowa to try and run up the score in rural areas, while Trump is focused on population centers home to 2/3 of the vote. Um, I mean, all that to say that Donald Trump is not, and his campaign, more importantly, is not resting on its laurels. It is absolutely in this to win it. And I think that that's an important thing to note, that anyone who thinks that Donald Trump or that Donald Trump or whatever situation, whether it's the New York trial, whether it's the federal trial or whatever, that he is not trying his best to campaign to win. His campaign is, and the entirety of the Republican Party is, the Republican Party apparatus is looking for Trump to win. And I think sometimes you can sit back and you can think, well, there's no way the Republican Party is going to vote and is going to keep this man in power because it will doom them. They'll lose against Joe Biden. They'll lose. Nope, they are fully still involved and still under the control of this cult of personality that is Donald Trump. Uh, Finally, in political news, interesting story out of Arizona, which is absolutely fascinating to me. Probably of the states, Arizona, I think Georgia, of course, the key states that Donald Trump tried to flip are interesting. Also, Nevada is very interesting to me because that came very, very close, very, very close, particularly in the Senate race. I don't think it was as much a factor in the presidential, but in the Senate race, it looked like Nevada was going to flip to the Republican side. But what's going on in Arizona because of Carrie Lake is absolutely fascinating. They cannot get rid of this woman. She is very formidable. Could be a vice president material, although she is running for the Senate. But this is from the Daily Beast. This is dated today the 27th. So, with former Arizona Senate candidate Blake Masters declaring Thursday that he will run for a House seat this cycle, the long brewing MAGA battle between Masters and failed Arizona Governor Carrie Lake is on. Lake isn't running for the seat herself, but a close ally of hers, Abraham Hamde, is running. In fact, Hamde got in the race just hours after Debbie Lesko announced that she was retiring and leaving the seat vacant last week. So that's another Republican that looks like they're going to be gone. The seat is R plus 10, meaning whoever emerges from the GOP primary is almost certain to become a member in Congress. Exactly 32 minutes after Masters made it official on Thursday that he was jumping into the race, Hamday announced that he had Lake's endorsement in case it was clear how much of a proxy war the congressional race had already become. Proxy war without proxies, one Arizona Republican operative told the Daily Beast. But even before the race kicked off, keen operators told the Daily Beast that the contest was shaping up to be a profound personal and petty primary. Another Arizona Republican operative was clear to the Daily Beast that Masters and Lake didn't like each other. I don't think they're friends, this operative said. On the campaign, the Blake and Lake thing looked great on stage, but I don't think they were particularly close. The source continued that Masters is a true intellectual, while Carey is an intellectual nitwit. As the Daily Beast reported last month, the bad blood between Masters and Lake has been an issue for some time. On a late night phone call, the two clashed over warring beliefs on topics including election fraud in Lake's race, appealing to moderate Republicans, and if Masters hid under his bed after his own 2020 loss. Lake and Masters also spoke about Arizona U.S. Senate seat up for grabs, which at one point they were both considering running for. Since then, former President Donald Trump ultimately weighed in by endorsing Lake before Masters could enter the race. That left Masters free to pursue the soon to be vacant congressional seat. So, it looks like there's no love lost on two of the craziest people that ran in Arizona for the attempt to become governor. Masters is particularly crazy and I think extremely dangerous. But it just goes to show you just how um, the infighting we saw in the House exists within the Republican Party, even within MAGA. So even different MAGA entities are at war with one another, and I think Donald Trump is the kind of guy who loves that, and loves to see people fighting for his respect, for his admiration, for his love. So stay tuned on that. Finally, the last thing I want to talk about is a very interesting reporting out of my hometown here in New York. And it spoke to me to be about why it is we are having Joe Biden is having so much problems in his numbers. And I think what his numbers show in terms of his approval numbers is it shows that people have a general discontent with Washington, with the government, and that always is reflected in the president's numbers. Is, do we think that government is working for us? Do we think that government is moving ahead to our advantage and working to our interests? And that's why paralysis and what was going on in the House that they could not come up with a speaker was so important to the benefit of Republicans. And this is a piece of reporting that is interesting, and there is a malaise that I think that is going on in the country. And this is, again, New York is a blue state. It voted for Joe Biden, um, overwhelmingly. But even here, with all of its problems, there is still more. There is a sense of hopelessness that seems to be gripping the state because so many things are happening all sort of at the same time. You've got this issue with regard to migrants coming here. You've got crime that the Republicans are always talking about. You do have issues of housing and the cost of housing. It's a struggle to make a dollar and deal with inflation in New York. It's so expensive. You've got homeless problems here as well. And you have here and this is just a little story. This is sort of a day in life. This is from the city.nyc, and it goes into a story about how some co-ops are going without gas. And without gas, that means that you don't have any cooking. In some cases, you may not even have any heat. And they're going without gas because New York passed a law, a local law, to deal with the fact that some of these older buildings that have not been and have ignored repairs, needed repairs over the years, have have are in violation of this new local law. And actually, I'm going to read about it and sort of go into it, and then talk about it on the other side. But now, Jose Fernandez, who had been cooking without gas for over 2 years, so have his neighbors in their West Harlem co op. Con Ed turned off the gas in the summer of 2021 after an inspector noticed a problem with an exterior pipe, fixed it, and subsequently performed a separate air pressure test that the system failed, said Fernandez, who is a shareholder and the manager of a 30 unit HDFC co op. And just to be clear, just so that people may not, who are unfamiliar with co ops, may not understand what a co op is, a co op is you don't own your apartment outright. You own shares in a collective. That's what a co-op. It is a collective. And so what it is that you have shares in the co-op. And um, co-ops are very popular here because they tend to come in and they tend to be less they tend to be more affordable, and you have a lot of people who want to own a home, have low income, don't have much income, or older. It was very popular many years ago. I think probably in the 60s 50s co-ops may have been more popular than they are today. Now it really is condos more. But so here you have this co-op where the people who own it, and it's an old building, and for years they've allowed these kind of needed repairs to go not addressed. And all of a sudden, the city passes a local law which requires Con Ed to go out and do a pressure test on your gas lines to see if they are faulty. And these old buildings, more and more, are coming up with faulty pressure tests or faulty pressure lines. And of course, this was being forced for Con Ed to do this because they want to prevent explosions or gas leaks. So you can see the reason why there's a need for this. But you also can see that by ignoring this kind of stuff for 30 years or so, now that it has hit, it has really put a pressure, downward pressure on owners. And part of one of the things, and immediately I began to think about Florida, this building that collapsed, I think a couple of years ago, and how they had, and the board there had delayed necessary repairs for years because no one wanted to do that. No one wanted to spend the money. And because of it, this building collapsed. Now they're going through um, all sorts of co-ops and buildings, and they're shutting them down. They're forcing boards. They passed a law that would force boards to have to make these repairs whether they like it or not. And all of these things, that this is Florida, one is in Florida, one is in New York. I talked about the other day about climate and how insurance rates in Florida are going through the roof. All of these pressures are affecting the government's numbers, and that government is in the form of Joe Biden. I think these things are the things that are causing Joe Biden's numbers to go down because he is seen as the example of the government, and they believe that the government has no way to solve their problems. This is what allows an authoritarian, a strong man, a guy who comes in to say, only I can fix it. This is what turns democracies into autocracies, is that people are so desperate, they're so fearful, they're so despondent about their government not being able to help them, to get them to where they need to do to deal with all of these problems that have been building up for 30 years or more. They haven't been able to do anything about it, and they are despondent. And a guy who comes in and says that he can fix it, and it's like, all right, what do we have to lose, right? I think that was actually Trump's one of his statements. What do you have to lose? That's happening right now, by the way, in Argentina, where a right winger looks like it. He was not. He didn't win outright. There's going to be a runoff, but he came damn close. But let me just continue this quickly before I sign off on YouTube. So Con Ed has turned off this guy's gas because it failed this pressure test. So this guy has been cooking without gas for the last 2 years. Fernandez said that he received an estimated $350,000 to replace the building's piping system, but it's a sum the co-op can't afford. We are kind of stuck. Fernandez's co-op is one of more than a dozen dealing with the fallout of aging buildings whose gas systems are not up to snuff. Some buildings find themselves caught in a lurch since 2016 legislation ramped up inspections on gas pipes, leading to a shutoff for safety reasons without providing funding for buildings to pay for repairs or transition to full electricity. Like other residents, he's been using portable electric burners to whip up meals for his family. The nonprofit Urban Homestead Assistance Board reports that other buildings, mainly located in Harlem, Washington Heights, Lower East Side, and around the Bronx, are experiencing the same dilemma, according to a project associate with UHAB. Um, Widespread piping problems. It's hard to determine how many buildings are affected by gas outages, as Con Ed and National Grid do not keep track, but the problem appears to extend beyond HDFCs. The root of the problem is lying in 2016 local law that requires most multifamily buildings to get their piping inspected periodically with the aim of preventing gas leaks, fires, and explosions. More inspections began in 2020 means the discovery of more instances of potentially hazardous conditions leading to shutoffs. About 30,000 buildings so far, or 22% of those examined, were discovered to have gas piping problems after plumbers performed inspections, according to the City Department of Buildings. Beyond what's found in the required inspections, issued with gas pipes tend to pop up in aging buildings, said Francis Rodriguez, director of weatherization for the Association for Energy Affordability. We are expecting that, yes, we're going to have more and more buildings that will get the gas shut down. Upgrading her gas lines will cost more than her building, filled with many seniors who live in fixed incomes, can afford. Rodriguez, one of the Association for Energy Affordability, said there are two solutions to pursue: either do brand new gas lines, and then you know that everything has been fully tested and is new and hopefully won't leak for another 20, 30 years, or change to electric and forget about the gas lines. Both routes are similarly expensive and can be disruptive. We don't want HCFCs to be left behind in the city's move toward decarbonization. We're really trying to kind of take this as an opportunity to help folks upgrade to induction stoves and not have to think about passing these gas pressure tests again. The Federal Weatherization Assistance Program administered through the state does not cover changing stoves from gas to induction or switching off fossil fuels without approval from program administrators. The program is meant to reduce energy use related to heating, cooling, hot water, and lighting. In the meantime, in West Harlem, Fernandez is managing frustration, his own and that of his neighbors, without about making do without an oven and powerful stovetop. Fernandez's family has opted for simpler one-pot meals like stir fries. Even simple dishes like pastas have been hard to make because it takes forever to boil the water. For holidays, you hear more of a collective groan in the building because it's more difficult for them to entertain and host events because they can't cook in the quantities that make sense. In spite of fielding complaints from his neighbors all the time, Fernandez says he is surprised actually by how well everyone has adapted to it. The building uses oil for space heating and hot water, and Fernandez is interested in eventually electrifying those elements too. But he is concerned about the risk of throttled power or brownouts in times of high electric demand, and would need to figure out how to split electrical costs among different units in the building. So this is the dilemma of our time. This is the dilemma that people are dealing with, and it is something that does not have an easy solution. Again, this is something that is years and years in the making and was created years and years ago and just was never addressed. And unfortunately, it's coming due now, unfortunately for Democrats and for Joe Biden. So that's it for today. If you enjoyed what you saw, my readings and my reporting here, you can like and subscribe. Click the bell to get notified when this live stream happens again. Again, this video streams. It begins streaming about 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time at Stream Me. That is stream.vtip.me. This began at around 10 a.m. The YouTube stream continues on probably around 11. I'll live stream on YouTube, and then after this, I will go back to live streaming a little bit more. If we get some more breaking news with regard to this manhunt, I will break into it on the live stream at Stream Me. But until the next time, I will be back on Monday. Until the next time, I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you on the next video.